The vertebrae they found were the wrong size, not larger than expected, wrong, as if the animal they belonged to had been operating under different biological laws than anything alive today. When paleontologists first assembled the skeleton in 2009, they had to stop multiple times, not because of damage or missing pieces, because the proportions kept suggesting something that shouldn't have been possible. Most people know Titanoboa as the largest snake that ever lived, 42 feet long, over a ton in weight, a giant constrictor from a lost world. That description is accurate, but it's also a comfortable lie we tell ourselves to make sense of something fundamentally abnormal. Because Titanoboa wasn't just a large version of a modern anaconda or python. It was structurally different in ways that reveal how alien Earth's past really was. The fossils come from the Cerrejón Formation in Colombia 60 million years ago, 5 million years after the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. The forest there was not like the Amazon. It was hotter, wetter, and the oxygen content in the air was different enough that animal physiology operated on a separate scale. Scientists initially assumed Titanoboa was an evolutionary opportunist, a predator that filled the gap left by extinct crocodilians and large dinosaurs. But the more they studied the remains, the more they realized they were looking at something else entirely. An animal that could only exist when the planet itself was in a state we no longer recognize. To understand what made Titanoboa abnormal, you have to understand the world that built it. The Paleocene rainforest was not a jungle, it was a thermal engine. Average temperatures hovered between 86 and 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity was near saturation. There were no seasons as we know them, just endless heat and growth. In this environment, the rules governing reptile size changed. Modern snakes are limited by temperature. Their metabolism is tied directly to external heat. A reticulated python in Southeast Asia can reach 20 feet because the climate allows it. But even in optimal conditions, there's a ceiling. The larger a snake becomes, the more energy it needs to move, digest, hunt. Past a certain point, the equation stops working. Titanoboa broke that equation. Its size wasn't just an advantage, it was a response to an environment so extreme that normal biological constraints bent. In temperatures approaching 90 degrees year-round, Titanoboa's metabolism could operate at a level that would kill a modern snake. It could digest massive prey faster, move with more power, sustain activity for longer periods. But there's something uncomfortable in that realization. Titanoboa didn't grow large despite its environment. It grew large because the environment demanded it, or allowed it. The distinction matters. The forest it lived in was a place where gigantism wasn't an anomaly, it was the baseline. Turtles the size of kitchen tables, crocodiles that dwarfed modern saltwater crocs, lungfish over 6 feet long. Titanoboa sat at the top of that hierarchy, not because it outcompeted other predators, but because nothing else could occupy the same thermal niche. Here's where the wrongness starts to clarify. A modern anaconda, the largest living snake, reaches about 20 feet and maybe 250 pounds. Titanoboa was more than twice that length, 5 times that weight. But the size difference isn't linear, it's exponential. When you scale a snake up to 42 feet, the physics change. The muscle structure has to be entirely different. The vertebrae have to support exponentially more mass. The constriction force doesn't just double, it multiplies. Scientists estimate that Titanoboa could exert around 400 pounds of pressure per square inch. For comparison, a human bite is around 160 psi. A modern anaconda at full constriction can hit 90 psi. Titanoboa didn't just squeeze harder. It applied pressure at a magnitude that would collapse a rib cage almost immediately. Prey wouldn't suffocate, their internal organs would rupture before asphyxiation set in. And the prey it hunted reflected that. Fossilized remains in the same formation show giant relatives of modern caimans and crocodiles, animals with armored skin and bone-crushing jaws, animals that in any other era would have been apex predators. Titanoboa ate them. But that raised a far more disturbing question. If Titanoboa was regularly hunting and killing 5-meter crocodiles, what did its hunting behavior actually look like? Modern constrictors are ambush predators. They wait, strike, coil. It's a patient, methodical process. But Titanoboa's size suggests something else. It couldn't afford to be patient. Its caloric needs were too high. It had to feed constantly. Some researchers believe it didn't ambush prey in the traditional sense. It may have actively pursued animals through the water, intercepting them mid-swim, using its mass not just to constrict, but to drown and crush simultaneously. That's not snake behavior. That's something closer to what a crocodile does or what an orca does. It suggests Titanoboa wasn't just large, it was behaviorally alien. And then there's the anatomy itself. When paleontologists reconstructed the skeleton, they noticed the vertebrae were shaped differently than those of any living snake. They were wider, thicker, built to support muscle attachments that modern snakes don't have. The spine wasn't just scaled up, it was reinforced in ways that suggest Titanoboa moved through water with a kind of undulating force that would have created visible currents. Fishermen today talk about how you can feel a large anaconda moving underwater before you see it. The displacement is tangible. Titanoboa would have announced itself in the water like a submarine. But it gets stranger. The skull fragments suggest a jaw structure designed not for swallowing prey whole in the way pythons do, but for holding prey underwater while it drowned. The teeth weren't just for gripping, they were for anchoring. This implies a feeding strategy that combined constriction, drowning, and possibly even tearing. Modern snakes don't tear, they don't have the jaw mechanics for it. Titanoboa might have. That changes the entire picture. It wasn't just a giant snake, it was a hybrid predator, something that blended constrictor traits with active, aggressive hunting strategies we associate with entirely different animals. It occupied a category that no longer exists. And perhaps most unsettling, it wasn't alone. The Cerrejón formation shows evidence of multiple Titanoboa individuals in overlapping territories. They didn't avoid each other the way modern anacondas do. They coexisted. Which means the rivers of that ancient forest were patrolled by multiple apex predators, each over 40 feet long, each capable of killing a crocodile in seconds. That's not an ecosystem, that's something else. What we're really talking about when we talk about Titanoboa is dominance. Not in the sense of being the strongest or the smartest, but dominance in the thermodynamic sense. Titanoboa existed because the energy available in its environment could sustain it, and once it existed, it began to shape everything around it. Other predators adapted by growing larger, or faster, or more armored. Prey species developed heavier bone structure, faster reproductive cycles, behavioral changes that kept them out of the water during certain times. The entire ecosystem bent around the presence of this animal. Rivers became more dangerous than open land. Smaller predators were pushed into marginal habitats.
The evolutionary pressure Titanoboa exerted wasn't subtle. It was architectural. And this is where the scientific implication becomes uncomfortable. Titanoboa tells us that Earth, in the recent past, was capable of supporting megafauna that operate on biological principles we no longer see. Not because those principles were evolutionarily inferior, but because the planet changed. The climate cooled. Oxygen levels shifted. Tropical rainforests shrank, and animals like Titanoboa disappeared. Not because they were outcompeted, but because the thermal window they required closed. They didn't go extinct in the traditional sense. They were thermally erased. That's a different kind of extinction. One that suggests the boundaries of what life can become are not fixed by evolution, but by planetary conditions. And those conditions can return. Scientists use Titanoboa as a climate proxy.
The size of the animal directly correlates to the temperature of its environment. By studying its proportions, they can back-calculate what the average temperature must have been. The numbers they arrive at are disturbing. To support an animal like Titanoboa, average annual temperatures would need to be at least 86 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit consistently for millions of years. We're currently on a warming trajectory. The Amazon is heating, tropical zones are expanding, and while we're nowhere near Paleocene levels yet, the trend is undeniable. Which raises a question no one really wants to ask. If the planet continues to warm, will we see the return of gigantism in reptiles? Not Titanoboa itself, but something like it. Something that takes advantage of a thermal niche that's been vacant for 60 million years. Evolution doesn't care about human comfort. It fills available space. And if that space reappears, something will occupy it. The fossils suggest it won't take long. Paleocene megafauna emerged within 5 million years of the dinosaur extinction. In geological terms, that's rapid. We think of Titanoboa as ancient history, but in the context of Earth's lifespan, it's recent. A blink, and the conditions that created it are not as far removed from our present as we'd like to believe. There's a photograph of the reconstructed Titanoboa skeleton on display at the Smithsonian. People walk past it every day. Most stop, take a picture, move on. But every so often, someone stands there longer than expected, staring at the vertebrae, trying to process the scale. Because seeing it in person does something the numbers don't convey. It makes you realize how alone you would have been in its presence. How irrelevant. Titanoboa didn't hunt humans, obviously. We didn't exist yet. But if we had, we wouldn't have registered as prey. We would have been incidental, background fauna, something it moved past on the way to actual food. That's the part that stays with you. Not that it was dangerous, but that it was indifferent. It existed in a world where human-scale concerns didn't matter, where the top of the food chain was occupied by something that operated on a different biological frequency entirely. And that world wasn't an alien planet, it was Earth. The same Earth we live on now, just under different conditions. The fossil record is full of animals like this, giants that came and went as the climate fluctuated, but Titanoboa is unique because of how recently it existed, and how clearly it shows us what the planet is capable of producing when the temperature gets just warm enough. It's not a monster from a fantasy, it's a thermometer, a biological marker of what happens when the world gets too warm. The last Titanoboa died around 58 million years ago. Its lineage didn't continue. No modern snake is directly descended from it. It simply ended when the conditions that allowed it disappeared. But the blueprint is still there, written into the genetic potential of every large constrictor alive today. Anacondas, pythons, boas. They're all carrying the dormant possibility of becoming something much larger, much stranger. All they need is the right temperature.